Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. The Volunteers dropped their 14th in a row to Alabama, which is amazing. When I was a kid, Tennessee lost 11 in a row to Alabama, and that seemed like forever. To be at 14 is remarkable. The bigger problem yesterday was Chuck nailed the line, and I lost money in the Cavaleris deal. We'll talk about that. 30 and a half. How dare he? We'll have a good show for you today. I know last week I had some people reach out that didn't like the fact that we smile after losses, that it means that we pull against them. No, we just don't want to sit here and do a 90-minute show like this. So you know what you get. We're going to have fun with it. We're going to talk Tennessee, Alabama. Let's get into it. First segment, brought to you by our friends at Garza Law Firm. If you're like me, you've been seeing a lot of ads for law firms that you've never heard of before. Well, that's because if you look them up, you're going to find that most of them aren't based in Knoxville. You're talking Nashville, Birmingham. The Garza Law Firm is right here in East Tennessee, right here in Knoxville. Marcos Garza is right here, part of this community. When you need an attorney, get a local attorney. Visit garzalaw.com. All right, I want to welcome in the first round of panelists on today's show. VFL Will Overstreet right there. From WNML, we have Jimmy Himes. You can hear him Monday through Friday on Sports Talk from 3 to 7. And right down there, Chuck Cavaleris, you can find him here every Sunday, the Cavaleris line, and then at various haunts around town. Okay, we start with big picture looking things. Game was never really competitive. In fact, the 31-point spread was a bigger margin of victory than Alabama had against Missouri, A&M, Ole Miss, or Georgia. This was their biggest win of the year so far. And the thing I want to know, was Tennessee doing everything it could to win that game, or were they managing to prevent a big, worse loss? Were they trying to hide perhaps their quarterback? Were they going all out for the victory, or were they trying to keep it from looking worse? Anyone?
For me, I texted you during the game. I thought it was managing the loss. I really truly thought this was more looking at what is this going to look like in recruiting season? And so how do we do that? Now, looking at the tape this morning, I could also come back and say, hey, we've realized what our quarterback can do and what he can't do. And unfortunately, right now, those can fall in the same line, which is we know on 3rd and 8, we're not going to let this guy throw the ball because they'll bring a blitz and he's going to make a bad decision. So I look at it this way, is that it's a little bit of both. They're managing that loss, but now they're saying it's because of the quarterback. We have to do that because this could have been a lot worse, just like we've seen the past couple weeks.
I think a lot of the conservative play calling is because you don't trust the quarterback. I don't know that I've ever seen a team run so much on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Now, they did pick some of those up, but I think it's let's don't put our quarterback in position to make a mistake. So, yeah, I think they were managing, trying to make sure they could try to keep the game close. That's what it looked like to me. Then later when they opened up a few plays, Guarantano hit some long passes on Alabama. But, yeah, I thought that was try to keep it close and don't let the quarterback make the catastrophic mistakes like he did against Kentucky.
The irony was Guarantano was actually throwing the ball pretty well yesterday. Chuck.
I thought you were trying not to lose big. That's how it came across to me. I kept waiting for a play off some of those running plays where you could get the quarterback out, maybe have a tight end, a receiver, or somebody simple where you're just working this side of the field there. And Guarantano, he played well. He made some plays with his feet, no interceptions. But it just wasn't like the type of play calling. Against an Alabama defense, look how much that's dropped off since Jeremy Pruitt left there. You can make some plays against that Alabama defense, and Tennessee made some, but not nearly enough.
Yeah, that's a positive spin there. I don't know that I'm going to credit Alabama's defensive decline because they lost Jeremy Pruitt quite yet, but okay. It's all right for you to go there.
I think it's some of it.
You've started the debate. I will be on the other side of that debate.
Well, for that stretch that they had, and I think Nick Saban would say the same thing. That front seven doesn't strike fear in your heart the way the players not quite as good. But did they even have a sack yesterday?
Well, Well, we're getting off topic, but
okay.
the gist
But-
is Nick Saban also said on Friday that offense now wins, and he's adjusted his
Yeah.
program. But
Okay.
anyway,
Go ahead.
good debate. People can battle that out on
Okay.
social media this afternoon, whether or not Alabama's defensive decline is because they lost Jeremy Pruitt. When you look at Tennessee running the ball 38 times when they're down big early, this is kind of a flip-flop. I've said all year you want to make Garantano a manager. It's tough to do that. I don't mean that when you're down 21 points. So that was what was unusual.
They
I
didn't
thought
get
the
your
game
memo.
plan. Yeah, the game plan was right. Just do that more often. Don't do it when you're down 21-0. Anyway, one other thing that stuck out, and we'll talk about this. Jeremy Pruitt said after the game, and I know this has gotten a lot of play. He was asked about the gap between Tennessee and Alabama, and he said, the gap is closing. I can assure you of that. That might not show on the scoreboard today, but the gap is closing. I can assure you of that. All right, well, let me give you some numbers here in terms of that gap. No more heartbreaks. Remember when everybody picked on Butch Jones? That idiot keeps losing these close ones in the fourth
Yeah.
quarter. Hey, you don't have to worry about close losses in the fourth quarter anymore. Pruitt has coached 30 games at Tennessee. He's 15-15. But 12 of his games that he's coached, 40% of all his games have been losses of 21 or more points. That ain't good. Versus Tennessee's big rivals, they're 0-8, and the average score is 43-15. Guys, are they closing the gap?
It sure doesn't look like it. I mean, to the fan, and you know, the Alabama game to me was a classic example. Second half against Georgia, do you feel like you've closed the gap? You did at halftime, maybe, but no, because you're not as competitive as you need to be.
That would be an argument in my favor in terms of Pruitt's defense. Might not be the problem at Alabama because it hasn't shown up here yet.
The ultimate indicator as to whether you're closing the gap is the scoreboard. So when you say it's not showing up on the scoreboard, well, then it's kind of hard to argue that you're closing the gap. If you're going to argue you're closing the gap, maybe you're talking about culture. Maybe you feel like you've recruited a lot of good young players, and by golly, in the next couple of years, they're going to be a lot better. Maybe that's it, but it's kind of hard for me to get past the scoreboard because that is the ultimate judge on whether you're closing the gap.
Yeah, it's not closing the gap for me. I mean, this is incredible to say that. I think it's more like a champions of life kind of statement. You can't put that out there because to fans and everyone else, they don't see that, right? And, you know, their eyes are going to look at this and go, I don't see it close. I don't see any bright spots. And so even if you think that, don't say that because that's just bulletin board material for people that don't want you here, and you're giving it to them very easily. So in my mind, no, you're not seeing a closing of the gap. I mean, you've seen some improvement in offensive line. I mean, our offensive line looks like they belong in the SEC. A few years ago, they looked like a big high school offensive line. So you have seen some things, but the other teams have gotten better. You know, they've got better offenses now. And so you're not closing the gap at all.
And don't forget, Alabama did that with their best receiver getting hurt on the opening kickoff and not even being available for the whole game. You know, thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family, but they didn't even have one of their best players. You know,
Well,
what could it have been if they would have had him?
You know, that's the other side of that coin, too. We're talking about Tennessee's game plan. Maybe it was protecting Garantano. Maybe it was just trying to prevent a worse loss. Of course, Lane Kiffin did that against Florida in 2009, and Urban Meyer actually got so tired of hearing that it was close that he pointed out he wasn't even playing to win. The issue, though, is not only was Tennessee trying to keep it within hand, Alabama, they took the foot off the gas pretty early, too. My question is, if you're talking about closing the gap, that could have been much worse yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at that Alabama team and you know, a little bit of discussion there of when they pulled their foot off the gas, and it was probably sometime in the second quarter. It was not, you know, I doubt this week they put in any new plays against Tennessee. If they put in new plays, it was to practice them against somebody else. This team had no doubts about when they came into Neyland Stadium, were they going to win or not. And not even for the few seconds that they lined up. They knew how this game was going to go. Their coach probably had a hard enough time keeping their mind in the game to go play this game.
I just thought they looked incredibly vanilla the whole game. I mean, how many times did they blitz in that game?
I was going to say exactly the
much.
same thing.
But if Pruitt had been there, they'd have
That's
blitzed
right.
a lot more, right, Chuck?
Yeah, it would have been much more impressive.
Stir the pot, Chucky.
We're gonna pick on you for that one all day. All right, when we come back, what were the takeaways on offense and defense? We'll grade both sides of the ball next on the Sports Source. Come on back.